I mean, congratulations on the film, Robert, and continuing that line of thought in terms of life imitating art. How much were you drawing on, experiences from your career as a stop motion director, and how much is creative license? How did that sort of idea evolve and then pull on, experiences of making films yourself?
I mean, I always say, when asked similar questions, I always say some of the things, as a stop motion animator, some of these things have happened to me, but not all of them. So I draw the line, at a certain point. But yeah, I mean, I've made stop motion films for the last 20 years, and I always felt the process itself it always struck me as a kind of a very, for people that aren't involved in stop motion, it's a very kind of secretive, kind of like unknown, almost occult process. And I kind of felt like I wanted to kind of make a film about that process and draw upon some of the things that have happened to me, but not all of them.
I mean, it's interesting with the themes of it as well, because it's almost about a technique, ostensibly, but then we sort of dive in and it's actually about, grief and loss and trauma, and it's also sort of about creativity and how we make art and comparing ourselves to others. So how did those sort of themes come together, and what was the process of sort of writing it? Did it sort of come to you as a whole vision, or was it a sort of jigsaw puzzle of different ideas that evolved over a long time?
I mean, my personal experience of stop motion, and I don't know if you've had this experience, I think we sort of discussed this before, but like I've had this experience quite often when I'm animating a character. It takes on a life of its own. And it's like, and actually not just the puppet itself, but actually, I mean, I made an entire film that was improvised from start to finish. And I had the sensation as I was making this particular short film that the film had its own life, its own inner life. And I was kind of, I wasn't sure if I was in control of it or it was in control of me. It was telling me what it was. I wasn't telling it what it was. And that was the core idea of this. It was like the concept of somebody who's trying to make a stop motion film and it takes on a life of its own. It almost has its own consciousness. Yeah. And then, yeah, it just followed after that, like very naturally, the themes of death and creativity in the face of death. And the idea of using stop motion as a metaphor for wanting to stop death or try and bring things back to life again, which is sort of in the film too. So that kind of came, organically as we wrote it.
It's interesting, yeah, because it's sort of, I guess there's like, for stop motion animators, there's a reverence around the puppets, and people often say, yeah, it feels like they have a life of their own, and they'll put them outside the room at nighttime because there's a strange sort of sense of life that they have. And it's true, often when you're animating, the puppet will sort of, tell you what to do.
I always think it's remarkable. Whenever I watch this film with an audience, the most vocal the audience ever is when the little girl runs in and grabs the puppet. Everyone's like, ah!
It's the most horrifying moment.
I'm presuming there are stop motion animators in this audience. Everyone like, yeah, you know what that feeling's like.
That's the worst. That's the most horrific thing for a stop motion animator. I mean, actually, it's interesting. I think when I first watched this film, I watched it with a couple of people who do stop motion animation, and the film starts and it's super relatable, and you're going, oh yeah, the antisocial side of things, getting lost in your work and hiding away, and then the murder side, less so. But it's certainly, I think, even from a broader perspective, this idea of having an artistic endeavor that you are so committed to and passionate about that you sort of start shutting off. And like you say, stop motion is a strange sort of space where, I mean, particularly with your work as well, because you're an artist who sort of, traditionally does everything, and you're making the puppets and you're building the sets and you're lighting. So I'm interested to know, with this film kind of transitioning to that sort of feature scale, what was that like, bringing, presumably like a massive team together to sort of work on all those elements, and how did that sort of transition feel?
Yeah, I mean, I think it was like you say, it was the complete opposite of how I would work when I make my stop motion films, because I do everything myself. And I literally do everything. I do it the way that Ella does it as well. I do it at home. I do it, with sort of fairly cheap lights and basic, that's my laptop. That's the actual laptop I use when I do stop motion, is the laptop she uses in the film. It doesn't have blood stains on it though. But yeah, I mean, The pleasure of the film is like, I always say, like, it's like the thing I love most about stop motion is the complete control that you have. The thing I love most about live action is the complete collaboration that you have. I love working with people, and I think it helps when you've made a certain amount of films that have a kind of flavor to them that I certainly wanted in this film. I didn't want it to feel complete, even though it's a live action film predominantly. I didn't want it to feel alien from my shorts. I wanted it to feel like it was still the kind of work I would do. And so having made those shorts, that's just a good communication device to kind of tune people into it, you know.
Yeah. And I guess for people who aren't so familiar with your work, it's not the first time you've done live action either. There's The Cat with Hands from 2001, and then you did another film called Monsters, which was sort of, they know films are sort of blending live action and stop motion. So was that something that because I know you talked about this seeing Fiend Without a Face when you were a kid, and this film sort of being ingrained in your head, which is mixing actors and stop motion. So was that something you were always sort of thinking about coming back to and sort of evolving as a language, that blend of actors and puppets?
Yeah, definitely. I feel like it's I still feel it's actually a very underexplored area because, of course, what happens, I mean, when stop motion was used as a special effect, well, that's kind of become obsolete now because people use CG now. So that language has gone, at least with most people's understanding of how special effects work. And I think that's a really interesting space. Having something that is definitely live action in the same frame with something that is definitely stop motion, and how those two things can possibly coexist. I still think that's a very underexplored area.
And it looks great. I mean, it's because often in the past, like you're saying, those kind of Harryhausen films and things, we can sort of see the difference in language, but actually the way you're shooting the stop motion on 24 frames per second, and it's quite smooth, and it's sort of the live action is almost stylized to meet that. So the blending is amazing, and it's hard to do, to composite and put those languages together.
Yeah.
And the scene where the girl's climbing up on the bed, I mean, it looks seamless, really. So was it hard, from a production point of view, coordinating all of that and putting it together?
It's just very complicated, and it just requires a lot of planning, basically, a lot of storyboarding, a lot of planning, a lot of good teamwork. Because I could bore you for like an hour about the technical aspects of it, but it's extremely complicated. More so from the fact that essentially you do the live action plate, and then you have to get the actor out, and then you do then the animators come in, and then you animate the puppet coming in with the same angle, same camera angle. Except you can't do that because the puppet's on the floor, and any animators in there, you can't just every frame 24 times a second lie down on the floor, animate the puppet a fraction, stand up, leave shot, etc. Just kill the animators. So we had to recreate the set 4 feet off the ground with a trapdoor in it so that the animators could pop out. So it's a different set, but it was so we had to raise the camera up, raise the lighting up to exactly match the live action plate, so that it looks exactly the same, except it's a replica set, but 4 feet off the ground.
Wow.
So it was very tricky and very technical to do.
And how did it work? Because you were saying, obviously, in the past, you were always doing everything. And I think on this film, maybe you had other animators coming in and helping. And what was the sort of process in terms of the timelines? Because presumably you had to sort of shoot things in a certain order. So that feels like a bit of a sort of, chaotic thing to work out.
Yeah, there was 2 animation phases to the shoot. All of the stuff where there is puppets and live action interacting, all those stop motion aspects were shot at the same time we were shooting the live action stuff. So we had an animation team come in, and they were doing that in close collaboration with the live action team. And then after the shoot, while we were editing, I shot all of the film within a film stuff. So all the stuff on the laptop screens. And whenever it goes full screen, animation, when we're in the film within the film, that was me while editing in post-production in my house.
Wow.
So it was quite, but it was kind of good in a way because I could use the edit as we were editing at the same time. So I could use the edit to kind of shape and mimic certain things that we were seeing in the live action.
So there's a dialogue going on between.
Have a bit more. Also, just I could cut corners because I could see, well, actually, the way the edit's going, we don't need that shot, so I could sort of drop it, and it allows you to kind of react to the live action material. So there was a dialogue between the two.
Wow. And I think with all your films, there's even in the first moments when they kind of open, there's this like sense of dread that I feel like something terrible is going to happen. And you have it with this film as well. And kind of even at the beginning when it feels, the relationship between Ella and her boyfriend feels like a nice thing. It's like an escape for her from her overbearing mother. But it's incredibly difficult to sort of create that sense of dread on screen because it's something that's quite intangible. It's hard to put your finger on that. So can you talk a bit about how you sort of is it something that's in the script? Is it when you're in the space with the actors and the camera crew that you're going, let's hold this shot a little bit too long, or is it lighting, is it sound? How do you?
It's a bit of everything. It's instinct essentially.
Yeah.
And I mean, a really good example is like the second shot of the film. So the first shot is an ominous black egg.
Yeah.
That's just ominous, right? The second shot is an ominous shot of Aisling Franciosi standing in a nightclub with strobes flashing. So you're immediately going, okay, there's a horrible egg, and now there's like an epileptic fit coming. So it immediately sets you on edge. But the thing about that opening shot of Aisling in the club, that wasn't originally designed to be basically the opening introduction to the character. It was actually one of her, like when she goes out to escape from her mother, she sometimes goes to this club. So we had this shot, and it's actually a shot of her in the club during that first section. But on the day, we were Leo, the cinematographer, and myself were looking at the monitor, Aisling's performance, and the way the lights were flashing, and the way it felt like the lights were animating her or something, and her performance, and the way it was like shifting. We just looked at each other. We were like, "This is like amazing." So we kept it going much longer than we originally intended. And then when we were editing, stick it at the front of the film because it's such a great, it's a perfect introduction to the character. It talks about stop motion, the process, talks about her as a character. It kind of did everything, So, and that's something as well, just playing around in the edit, putting sound on things, and just kind of feeling your way through it, really.
And do you think there's more of that in live action? Because often in animation, traditionally we tend to have a storyboard and an animatic, and then we shoot it. And I know you often, reject that sort of process. But do you think there's more space when you're kind of editing live action to sort of move things around and play, and you've got maybe more options than you would have in animation?
Yeah, much more. I mean, you essentially throw out the script when you start editing. Right. Really, I mean, the first edit that we did of the cut that we followed the script of the film, which didn't really work. I mean, aspects of it work, but you realise the script is a blueprint. You shoot material, and then you let the images talk to you. And actually, loads of people told me this beforehand, and I didn't believe them. They're like, it's different from animation. It's like you have to be fluid with the material. Let the imagery in the edit dictate the flow of the story. So the core of the core of the film is exactly the same, but the way that we found our way through shots and the story, you react to the material really, and you kind of forget the script because you switch things around and try things out and experiment a lot to find the most dynamic way of telling the story.
And did it evolve a lot from that sort of initial idea? I mean, how long was that sort of process of like coming up with the initial idea to then sort of getting to that edit?
From the first writing the idea to the finish, that was like 10 years.
Right.
So we wrote the story years and years and years ago. I mean, it took years to get this film made.
Yeah. And is that mainly to do with kind of financing, finding the right partners, and
Yeah, and then COVID, and lots of things happened, but it's just just kind of quietly just sticking with it, and great team, great producers who just stuck with it and didn't give up on it, and then and then finally took a long time. But like the shoot was 25 days. It's fairly quick. I mean, if stop motion animators, obviously it's like take a very long time to shoot. So everything was shot in 25 days, and then all the stop motion stuff I did afterwards we were doing at the same time as the edit. So.
And do you think having that sort of longer process to that, do you think it was beneficial for the film in terms of sort of evolving things and playing with different ideas or doing different drafts of the script, or did it just feel frustrating and you wanted to just, get out and make it?
I mean, to an extent, you grow as a person and you get more ideas and you mature, and it does allow the idea to kind of mature somewhat, but not. I wouldn't say I would be happy to wait that long
for the next one.
every time I make a film because it's just a bit much, isn't it? You know,
Yeah.
in years.
We're going to open it up to audience questions in a moment, but I wanted to ask you, I mean, the sound, we mentioned then, just hearing the sound in this cinema is fantastic. And obviously, you know, the sound design in your shorts is really evocative and really immersive. And in here, there's a lot of like very sort of specific Foley and sound design. I'm interested to hear about, what that process was like on a feature, that sort of expansion of the sound realm, and how you collaborated with a sound designer.
Yeah, I had an amazing sound designer on this film, a guy called Ben Baird, who's just incredibly creative and has the technical skills to pull off those ideas as well. Yeah. So I would love to be able to say the squeaking armature idea, that was not my idea. That was Ben's idea. While we were talking about it, he said, you know, maybe they could squeak as they move, the armatures could squeak, and we could use that. We could actually use it in other places. We could use it when the humans move as well, and that could become a thing. And I was like, armatures don't squeak. Yeah. Let's go quiet. They don't squeak. It doesn't matter. It's just a cool idea. Yeah. And I said, oh, well, yeah, actually, that's a really good idea. So let's go with it. And then we pushed it in the first pass. We pushed it way further. It became a bit much. It became comical. It's like every time Tom moves, he's like squeaking all the time. It became too much. So we pulled back. But yeah, I mean, it's just great to collaborate with very creative people who are tuned into the idea and tuned into what you're trying to do, and then just bring stuff to the table that's just great, you know. It just came out of the idea. It came out of the logic of the idea, really. It's like if you follow the logic of the idea, she starts off with mortician's wax, then she goes to steak, then she goes to a dead fox. Just goes there, doesn't it, really? So it came out of that, and then again, it's like one of those edit things. It's like in the script, that bit, the leg bit, that didn't go on for as long in the script, but when we were cutting it, it was just so effective. We were just like, let's keep it going, keep it going. We used all the material that we'd shot for that to get as much of it as possible. So it's one of those things where, like in the edit, you just sort of discover stuff. So we pushed it. It wasn't originally going to be that extreme, but we pushed it in the edit. Yeah, I mean, it hasn't personally happened to me in that way. I mean, that idea just came out of the idea that Suzanne, Ella's mother, is a control freak in all aspects of her life, including the way that she talks to her daughter and controls her daughter's animating for her. So it's really just complete control freakery on every level. Hasn't personally happened to me. And I've never worked in a commercial place like that either. So that's kind of just based on stuff friends have told me. You know, that's the eyeball stuff and working in that environment. So, but I have a lot of friends in the industry, and I know what it's like. I mean, I have friends that work at Leica, and I know that world very, very well. And so, yeah, it's just the world of, I mean, stop motion animators. I mean, you guys know what this film's about, right? So, it's just a particular type of masochism. We didn't use meat because actually meat's not very good for animating because it actually dries up. Because I've tried. It's not actually that good. So we used silicone rubber that looks like meat, and a bit of Vaseline as well, because that always kind of catches the light nicely. And there is extra stuff that I shot actually that's not in the film, but it's kind of just more kind of creepy Ashman stuff, and more like sort of meat girl cowering and stuff like that. So there is more material, but like it's not that interesting.
Is there a Blu-ray special feature where you have it all cut together?
I was thinking, there isn't actually, but we should do that actually.
Pop it on YouTube.
Yeah. I think I have become simultaneously more controlling when I do animation, and also more collaborative when I do live action stuff or stuff where I'm working with people. I think the greatest lesson I learned making this film is producer Alan took me aside before we started shooting. He just said, the only thing I'm going to say to you, I know you're going to make a great film. The only thing I'm going to say to you is trust your team, because he's seen films fall apart because the director doesn't trust the team. And that was a great piece of advice for me, and I really took it to heart, and I did follow that, because if you choose the right people and you tune them in correctly, you shouldn't have to doubt them when you're shooting. Just let them bring amazing stuff to you, And so and when I did The Cat with Hands, I think I was a bit more not trusting, being a bit more micromanaging and controlling. But here I was a bit more like, I had too many things to worry about anyway. You don't want to be like second guessing your team when you're shooting. So that was I think probably the biggest change in my working method.
Amazing, thank you.
Well, it's a great collaborative effort, and I think it's it's amazing what you've done. It's a sort of real contemporary piece of horror mythology, and the Ashman's going to be going down as a character that we will remember and haunts our nightmares. So thanks everyone for coming, and thanks to Justin for programming the whole stop motion season. The Leica exhibition is on for the next few weeks as well, and there's more stuff screening. But thanks so much to Robert Morgan for joining us, and brilliant film.
Thank you. Thanks for coming.